The gospel this morning can be found on page 1252 in the Bible. The gospel is from John, chapter 13, beginning with verse 31, page 1252. The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Lord,
Now before the festival of the Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. When Judas, please go to verse 31. When Judas had left them after the Last Supper, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. You also should love one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." The Gospel of the Lord.
praise you, Lord Jesus Christ.
You know, our church is like a good mother, very wise. She gives us a full 7 weeks of Easter season. We need this extended time to reflect on those lessons Christ taught us in his passion and his resurrection. Today, we are reminded of the new commandment that Christ gave us the day before he suffered. We are brought back to the Last Supper when Jesus was gathered with his closest friends. It was a night when his heart overflowed with love as it had never been before. It was a night when he revealed the secret identity of every single Christian, the distinguishing mark. "This is how all will know that you are my disciples," he said, "if you have love for one another." And not just any kind of love, but Christ-like love. "I give you a new commandment. As I have loved you, so you also should love one another." Being a Christian brings having an urgent, important mission in life. It means being another Christ in the world. Jesus gave his very life in order to fulfill his Father's will and win salvation for all of us sinners. Each one of us is called to reproduce in the unique circumstances of our lives the exact same pattern, dedicating our lives to discovering and fulfilling God's will and striving to help so many people as possible. Help them to know, love, and follow Christ. As we heard in today's gospel, God the Father was glorified through the obedience of his Son. We too are glorified through the sacrifice of his Son. I'd like to just give you a little illustration of how Christ-like love could be as simple as going out of one's way to show interest in someone else. Hopefully, you will be able to see how God the Father and God the Son can be glorified, and we in turn can be glorified. This happened about 15 years ago. A normal, everyday Christian in Dublin, Ireland, middle-aged, named Liam. He was on his way to work, and he saw a young man admiring one of Dublin's beautiful Gothic structures. The young man was Darren, an American graduate student on a European tour. Liam left his own business and offered to show the obviously enthralled Darren around the church. Darren accepted. An hour later, after attending a novena to St. Rita with the local nuns and having a cup of tea with the parish priest, the two emerged fast friends. They exchanged addresses and promised to keep in touch. Before they parted, Liam had a sudden inspiration. He debated about whether he should say anything, but finally he took his courage in his hands, and leaning over, he whispered a question to Darren. "Have you ever thought of becoming a priest?" Darren said he hadn't, and the conversation ended abruptly. Their correspondence eventually trickled off as time went on. Liam hadn't heard from Darren in nearly a year when he received a surprising letter from him. "I'm studying to be a priest, Liam," Darren wrote. "You have no idea how grateful I am to you for putting this idea into my head and with your question. You are an instrument of the Holy Spirit." The years of training passed, and in 2004, Ordination Day arrived. The church in Fargo, Minnesota was full to capacity, and there in the front row was smiling broadly Liam. A few weeks after his ordination, Father Darren was diagnosed with leukemia. The doctors tried everything, but there was no cure. Father Darren had only a few months left to live. He accepted his suffering with spiritual joy, and so did Liam. Father Darren died in September of 2005. He was 34 years old. He died young, but thanks to Liam's going just a little bit out of his way to show an interest in him, on that afternoon in Dublin, he died having discovered that he fulfilled his vocation by the fact that he was ordained. He glorified God, as well as Liam glorified God. Today, the church invites us to ask ourselves if we have really decided to follow Christ's new commandment. Sometimes we think this new commandment is only for people who are already saints, but it isn't, my friends. It's a path to sanctity. Sometimes we think this commandment is too difficult to be realistic, but if it were, Christ would not have issued it. So what is holding us back? The problem that we are all, like Charlie Brown, wishy-washy. We need to make a decision. We need to decide once and for all that following Christ, striving to live as he would live, we're in our shoes. This is going to be our highest priority. He can help us. He can teach us. He can strengthen us. He can pick us up when we fall down, inspire us when we get discouraged. He can do all that for us, especially through the sacraments. But there's one thing that even God cannot do for us. He cannot choose our highest priority in life. Only we can do that. With the help of his grace, moving our freedom from within us. Today, let's choose Christ. Let's make a decision, once and for all. Today, bolstered with his very strength in Holy Communion, let's turn that commitment into a firm commitment by making it our first priority every day to love one another as Christ has loved us. Maybe plan 2 or 3 ways this week to share his love with your fellow man.